Okay, shalom everybody. We are doing Hilchot Shabbos, the 39 Melachot. Last time we talked about Nolad. We talked about Nolad Gamor, absolute Nolad, and we talked about Ke'en Nolad, quasi Nolad. Okay, then we started talking about basis, which is the idea that you can have a surface where something, Muktza, or not Muktza for that matter, something is resting on this surface. This surface serves as a basis. It could be a basis l'davar ha'asur, something which is forbidden to be used on Shabbos, or a basis l'davar hamutar, right? When I put my candlesticks for my Shabbos candles on the table or on the shelf, and I light them before Shabbos, that shelf or that table has now become a basis, a base for a davar ha'asur, because I can't come in contact with the lights at all, the candles on Shabbos. However, by putting the chalas of Shabbos also on the table at the same time, right before Shabbos, it went into Shabbos, this surface, not just as a basis, as a base to support a davar ha'asur, that which is forbidden to be in contact with on Shabbos, but also a davar hamutar, something which is permitted to handle on Shabbos, okay? The concept of basis, one more time. A Muktza item extends its own status of Muktza to any object upon which it was intentionally placed before Shabbos and was left remaining there on Shabbos. Meaning, for whatever reason, if you could remove the offensive item, if you were allowed to on Shabbos, then it's no longer, the table is no longer a basis. So for example, if I can move a hammer on the table on Shabbos, right, the Shabbos table, let's say I can move that hammer because I'm using it for something that I'm allowed to, like cracking a walnut, right? Once I moved it, I could put it back in its proper place. Now that table is no longer, right, the basis of a Muktza object. I'm saying, oh no, if it has a hammer on it, it's a problem. If the hammer was the only thing on it, or it came into Shabbos just with the hammer on it, right? Meaning you can theoretically remove the status of a basis for a davar ha'asur on Shabbos, theoretically. Here, let's see, okay? So the Muktza item extends its own status onto the object or the surface that it was placed, and the object upon which the Muktza item was placed, or by which it is supported, is called a basis of the Muktza item. For example, if I hung my jacket on, if I have a peg on the wall, and I'm hanging my my purse or my car keys. So now it's being supported by that hook. Okay, money left intentionally in a bowl before Shabbos causes the bowl to become Muktza, even if the money, here he says it's not true. Even if the money is later somehow removed, that bowl now is still there, and that bowl went into Shabbos, right, with the status of Muktza. So if the money is later somehow removed, if a kid takes the money, knocks the money out, that bowl is still Muktza because the Muktza was extended to it from the money before Shabbos. The flame on a candlestick causes the candlestick, the tray beneath the candlestick, and the table to become Muktza. However, if the Shabbos challah was placed upon the table on Erev Shabbos, the table is not Muktza. Money deliberately left in a drawer causes the drawer to become a basis of the money, and therefore Muktza. That's the concept of a Muktza drawer, right? If the Muktza item is removed from upon the basis, or the basis is somehow removed from beneath the Muktza item, the basis remains Muktza for the remainder of Shabbos under the principle of migu de iskatze. Right, we mentioned we're going to get to that in a couple of pages. However, if there are non-Muktza items of greater importance resting on the basis does not become Muktza. So you can alleviate this whole problem if at the same time that the Muktza was on this surface before Shabbos, if you also place something of greater value that is not Muktza, right? Apparently, the chalas, in the eyes of halacha, have more value than the flames of the candles, okay? And once again, because of migu de iskatzia, just because the Muktza item over the course of Shabbos gets removed, it does not like we were saying a minute ago, it does not alleviate the Muktza status of the basis. Examples. A bowl with some coins inside does not become Muktza if it also contains cookies or dessert needed for Shabbos. If the challah was placed upon the table on Erev Shabbos together with the candlesticks, the table does not become Muktza because it is also The table is also a basis for the non-Muktza challah, which is of greater importance in respect to Shabbos needs than the candles. It is more crucial if you only have enough money for candles and enough money for bread for challah on Shabbos, the challah takes precedence. There is a minhag to place the challah on the table on Erev Shabbos for this reason. A drawer containing money does not become Muktza if clothing needed for Shabbos is also inside it. Okay. The following are exemptions. There are several important exemptions to the principle of basis. There is something called shocheach, in the case where somebody forgot. There is something called derech akroi, which means in a random manner, and there is something called chavero, a category called chavero, which means his friend. Okay, so the first one is called okay, it means somebody who does not own it, meaning somebody does not own the item. We're going to explain. So the first category is shocheach, he who forgets. The principle of basis applies only where the Muktza item was placed intentionally upon the non-Muktza item. Okay? However, if the Muktza item was left there unintentionally, or rather, you only put it there temporarily and you wanted to put it somewhere else before Shabbos, but you forgot, it does not cause the item upon which it was placed to become a basis. The power of a Muktza item to extend its muksicality, if you will, to the basis is only if its presence there was intentional, if the placement was intentional. If you forgot, there was no intent for the act for this to be a support for this going into Shabbos, and therefore, by extension, or the Muktza status cannot be extended to it. Okay? Now that's the general principle, but there's actually 3 subcategories of shocheach. What if it was just unintentional placement? I never meant to put it down. It's not that I meant to put it down temporarily, but rather I was juggling something, I don't know, I had to tie my shoe, I put it down and I forgot about it. Right? Unplanned placement during the week, or placement specifically when it was placed Erev Shabbos with plans for removal before Shabbos. These are going to be all subcategories. All 3 of these categories are forms of unintentional placement and are included within the general premise of shocheach, as shall be explained. Okay, so the general category is called I forgot. And the first subcategory of I forgot is unintentional placement. What does this mean? This refers to situations where the Muktza item was placed upon another item inadvertently. If coins fell unintentionally onto a chair before Shabbos, the chair does not become a basis during Shabbos. One may therefore tip the chair and allow the coins to slide off. The chair may then be moved and handled. It found its place without my intent, and I only discovered on Shabbos. That's easy enough, right? If a toddler placed a rock or other Muktza object on his chair just before Shabbos, the chair does not become a basis because a child that young lacks the capacity for halachically viable intent. We say a Chanan, somebody who's immature, right, has no dat, he has no intent. Therefore, he cannot acquire things, right? He can't sell things. He can't. We don't consider intent, halachic intent, by a child that they're capable of that, and therefore, if he places something Muktza on a surface to become a basis, it doesn't have the power to make that. It's without intent, essentially. So his placement of the rock is therefore considered unintentional. Okay, so the first category, the most basic, straightforward category, is it ended up where it is without anybody intending for it to be so, and it was discovered like that on Shabbos. Okay. The next category, subcategory, is when it was placed there during the week, meaning not specifically on Erev Shabbos, but it was not planned. It was intentionally placed, but it was not premeditated, it was not planned, that's not where it belongs. And it was done over the course of the week, way before Shabbos. This refers to situations where the Muktza item was placed deliberately upon another item in the middle of the week, except Friday, but without any conscious thoughts or plans for leaving it there on Shabbos. This means that the owner did not consciously say or think to himself, I want this item to remain here over Shabbos, when he placed it there. That's how we're defining intent. Unplanned placement of items during the week is not considered intentional with regard to basis, even when done deliberately, because items are constantly moved about and are not expected to remain in one place. We can't say that he intended, meaning he didn't have specific intention. So its default status is something it didn't belong there. It didn't have to be there. Therefore, their placement upon an item more than a day before Shabbos does not represent the degree of intent required for establishing a halachic basis.
Oh, say again?
Okay. This subcategory is true for every day of the week except for Shabbos. Meaning, if it was before, except Friday. If you would do this on Thursday, we assume that you never intended for it to stay in going in on Shabbos.
Like it put like in Thursday, like candles on the table.
No, it's
right?
like that.
It's
No,
for Shabbat.
whoa, that's okay. Since the nature of things is to constantly move around, therefore, when you place something on a surface and you want it to stay there, we're saying that you need to have conscious intent. Conscious intent means that you're saying, I'm placing this here and I want this to be going in on Shabbos. And if it's anything short of something Shabbos, like you're saying, obviously that I'm putting it there for intent. Meaning I didn't have intent, I just put it down, right? I mean, I was conscious of putting it down, I put it down deliberately, but I didn't have intent for it to stay on Shabbos. We don't assume, meaning since the nature of things is to move around a lot, right? We're assuming anything before Erev Shabbos is already enough time that it would move. The problem is, if you would do it on Erev Shabbos, there's already probably some level of conscious presumption, right? That it's going to stay there into Shabbos. Okay, that's why it's in a different category. So once again, the first two categories we talked about is when it's totally unintentional, it fell, or a child put it there. He's not capable of having intent. The second one is that it was without conscious intent to stay before Shabbos, and it was over the course of the week before Friday. Okay? Unplanned placement of items during the week, meaning it is intentional but unplanned. There's no plan that it's supposed to stay there, right? Unplanned placement of items during the week is not considered intentional with regard to basis, even when done deliberately, because items are constantly moved about and are not expected to remain in one place. Therefore, their placement upon an item more than a day before Shabbos does not represent the degree of intent required for establishing a halachic basis. Example, if money was put into a dish during the week and was left there on Shabbos, the bowl does not become a basis. It wasn't done on Friday. Is that where the money belongs? No. Is this a dish set aside specifically for money? Well, then you don't have the issue anyway. It's Muktza anyway, right? So any way you want to cut it. However, if the Muktza object is placed upon or into a non-Muktza item that is its usual place of storage or placement, the non-Muktza item becomes a full-fledged basis even during the week. Meaning if that's the place designated for that, then we know that if you put it there, it's meant to go into Shabbos. So there's no way out that it's going to be a basis. Any placement of a Muktza object upon an item on which it belongs or upon which it is normally placed is considered intentional with regard to basis. If money is left in one's shirt pocket during the week, you have a special pocket, right, for your 20 shekel bills, right? So, and if the money is left in one's shirt pocket and is not removed before Shabbos, the entire shirt becomes a basis and may not be handled on Shabbos. It's not just that you have, right? What happens, it happens all the time that you put on an item of clothing, right, on Shabbos, and you have Muktza. We know that the item of clothing is not a basis because you can empty out your pockets, right? As long as you're not outside. If you're outside and there's no air, you should keep on walking. We're going to talk about that. But anyway, here he's saying that if it's a regular place, that the money always appears. That's why the Talmidei Chachamim have a custom never ever to handle money when they wear their Shabbos clothes, or to always wear Shabbos, meaning not to wear your Shabbos clothes during the week. So there's many stories where even on Motzei Shabbat, they were very, very careful not to handle money or put it right when they were wearing their Shabbos clothes. Okay, placement on Friday. So the last category is when you place it deliberately but unintentionally maybe on Erev Shabbos. This refers to the placement of a Muktza item upon a non-Muktza item on Friday with the conscious intention to remove it before Shabbos, but you forgot. I mean, you never intended. You put it there on purpose. It was on Friday. You were hoping before Shabbos to take it off, but you know how Fridays are. Right? The placement of an item with specific intention of removing it before Shabbos is not considered intentional with respect to basis, and therefore, you're good. If money was temporarily put into a dish on Friday with the intention to remove it from the bowl before Shabbos, the bowl does not become a basis. However, if a Muktza item was placed upon another item on Friday without any conscious plans to remove it before Shabbos, you know that you just put it there and you said, I'll deal with it later. I don't know what I'll do with it. You never necessarily intended to take it out before Shabbos. Then default, you put it there on Friday. You could assume it was going to be there on Shabbos. That's a basis, right? In this case, the placement is considered fully intentional because it was to be expected that an item put down close to Shabbos would probably remain in its place when Shabbos arrives if you didn't have the conscious specific plan to put it somewhere else. So that's what the last category is hinging on. Whether you put it there and you intended on Friday, but you intended to take it off before Shabbos, you just forgot. Then you're okay. Okay? So that was all, those were examples of the first category of shocheach, he forgot. Right? Once again, he forgot, that means if it went there without intent, meaning it fell there, or a child put it there, there's no intent. The second category is if it's during the week, if I placed it there and it was unplanned to stay for Shabbos, right? I just forgot. And the last one was if I put it on Friday with the express intent to take it off before Shabbos and I forgot. Okay? Those are all times where the Muktza item does not extend its Muktza status to the basis. Okay, now we mentioned the next category is called derech akra'i, random placement. According to most poskim, the principle of basis applies only if the Muktza item was placed with the clear intention that the non-Muktza items serve as a base of support for it. However, if the Muktza item was merely placed on top of the other item because there was no other space, meaning I'm reorganizing my desk right before Shabbos and I have my calculator there and I put it on my pile of books, I'm shuffling around, and I don't want it on the books, I'm in the middle of shuffling and I had no place where I put it on the books, right? So according to most poskim, that would not render those books a basis. Okay? So, if the Muktza item was merely placed on top of the other item because there was no other space, the non-Muktza item does not become a basis. This concept is known as derech akra'i. It's a random placement. It's not a placement with intent because that's where it belongs, right? And this idea is very relevant to many common situations. If a box of dishwasher detergent was left on top of a box of matzah in a loaded pantry, the matzah is not considered a basis and may be pulled out from beneath the box of soap and used. You're trying to fit everything into your shelf and you're having problems. So temporarily you smush some things on top of some things. You never intended that the proper place for the detergent is to rest upon your matzah box. If frozen raw meat or fish was packed into a freezer on top of cake, now the frozen meat is muktza because you can't do anything with the Shabbos unless somebody chas v'shalom gets a black eye. Then you could pull it out, but otherwise it's muktza, and it's on top of dessert. You want to get dessert, so the cake may be pulled out from beneath the muktza item and used. According to most poskim, derech arai, which is another derech arai. I don't know if this is it might be a typo, because akra'i comes from the language of mikra, meaning happenstance, as if there's no intent. Arai also means that. Arai is the opposite of kavua. Arai means it's temporary, right? So I'm not sure if this is separate. I don't know, let's see. According to most poskim, derech arai placement, a haphazard placement, is not considered intentional placement for establishing a basis. However, some poskim are stringent in this matter, and even in our case, regard derech akra'i as a form of intentional placement that confers the status of basis upon the item beneath the muktza object. It is therefore best to avoid handling such items where this is possible. Okay, so he's noting here that you already have a difference of opinion in halacha. There is a more stringent view and a more lenient view, and in regards to this, he's advocating being stringent. Now, there may be other ways to deal with this situation. We have to see, because there are other ways that you can interact with muktza. If a box of dishwasher detergent was left on top of a box of matzah in a loaded pantry, one should not pull out the matzah if there is another open box of matzah that is not beneath a muktza item. Let's say you don't have another, so given the choice, you should go for the other box. You can't say that just because you're allowed to, you can take the unopened box under the detergent. However, if you don't, and there is a need for lechem mishnah, that may already, be a good reason to be samech on the poskim Okay. These are all issues of derabanans. I'm just reminding us. Okay? Meaning this is how careful we are in terms of how the derabanans play out. Okay, so that was derech akra'i. And then you have the last category is chavero, his friend, meaning a non-owner. As explained, only the intentional placement of a muktzah object confers the status of a basis upon the non-muktzah item onto which it is supported. However, a non-owner's placement does not cause the supporting non-muktzah item to become a basis, even if you place the item there intentionally. If you have somebody else who is not expressly working on your behalf, and he created a situation like this, it is not enough. Right? Since he does not own neither the item that he placed there or the basis, right? So, or just rather the item that's placed on the basis does not make it a basis because you didn't put it there, and therefore it doesn't have your intent. If one comes to Shul on Shabbos and finds a sheet of expensive stationery on top of his siddur or sefer, he may blow it off and use the siddur or sefer. The siddur does not become a basis because the one who placed the muktza stationery on the siddur had no right to do so. So stationery was an example of muktza that we mentioned before, which is machmat chisaron kis, meaning it cannot be used. Presumably, it's not meant to be used for anything on Shabbos because it's meant to be written on. You can't do that on Shabbos, and it is you wouldn't want to use it for anything else or handle it because it would damage it, right? So therefore, it's a muktza, and therefore you'd blow it off because you're moving it without your hands. Okay, a non-owner's placement, even intentional, is not legitimate because he has no right to impose any halachic changes on an item without the owner's consent. We don't let somebody mess things up for you like that. Okay. Should we pause here? It's 11:30.
Yeah.
Okay, Baruch Hashem.